This is the key to making all growth work. Literally, I couldn't say that any louder unless I caught my hair on fire or something. Literally, a key to making all of growth work, whether that's relationships or goals or clinical issues or whatever. And here is what I mean by this. You've heard a lot of talk over decades now about self-esteem. Um, it's one of those terms that it's in some ways it gets kind of used where it becomes part of our nomenclature. And what are we even talking about when we talk about that? In other ways, as a construct, actual construct, it's got a lot of issues with it. But let me tell you but everybody knows, I mean, you want to feel good about yourself, right? That's a given. Life's difficult if you go through life always down on yourself or not believing in yourself or having confidence or all that stuff. But there are, I'm going to call it pieces of equipment that drive all of that, that live in your head. And basically, this gets to the very nature of how we are constructed, how life works. And the reason I prefer this term, self-image, to self-esteem, I should say reasons are myriad, because I'm a psychologist and I kind of work with the equipment. Now, the equipment works like this. You have an image, a picture that drives life in virtually every aspect of life. The way, if you take your visual image, just to use the analogy or metaphor for a second, we take in light rays and that produces a picture that gets translated to the brain that has a lot of meaning associated with it. That's why we can derive meanings and contexts and a lot of stuff from what we see. Well, your brain does that work apart from visual. It does that work in an operating way in terms of your image, your picture of yourself. Now, I mean psychologically, not visually, but the image of yourself, the blueprint is another good word, of yourself lives in there. This is who I am, okay? And because life is relational in its very existence and essence, you have an ongoing picture of the other, okay? So life is about what psychologists call an object relationship, your love objects. And what that means is that you have a picture of the self object, okay? Your picture of yourself. I know these words like going, what are you talking about? But you have a picture of yourself and you have a picture of the other in every interaction that derives how you interact, okay? Now, let's go to the earliest moments of life. When you are a baby, none of that's been laid down yet, pretty much. It's very physical. It's very driven by tones and touch and cues that you're getting. And basically, the first one that you have of yourself and the other is in a relationship, and your picture of yourself is one that comes in that relationship, it's developed in that relationship. And when you have a need, for example, or you have hunger, or you are in distress, or you're hurting in some way, the little baby, okay, there's an other that is out there, hopefully, that does something, okay? Now, hopefully what the other does is it embraces you and takes you in and comforts your need, comforts your emotions, or in happier moments, enters into that with you and celebrates the joy. You see a mother's face, and they're nodding at each other, and the little baby. And then also, like at the most basic level, you get satisfied by the other. They have what you need and they're willing and desirous to give it to you. Starts with milk. Starts with comfort. Now, once that's responded to, you're in this dance where you're hooked up together and you start to get a picture of yourself. My needs are valid. My feelings are valid. I'm loved. I'm wanted. I can trust others. Others are trustworthy. Now we've flipped it to your view of others. One of my favorite verses. It says in the Psalms, David said, God, you taught me to trust you at my mother's breast. See, he was forming a picture of the other that transfers later to God. Well, also transfers to other people in your life because it's a piece of equipment. So let's make this real simple. If you have a picture of yourself as wanted and lovable and you're validated and your needs and feelings matter, then what are you going to do with your feelings and your needs and all that kind of stuff? You're going to not even think about it. You're going to assume that if I reach out into the world, the other, because my picture of them is that they are able and competent and care and are for me and understand me. Your picture of them is they're going to be there. So what do? You reach out, you connect, and it works. That's a good life. Now, by and large, there's kind of a fulcrum, if you think of a seesaw, that, in developmental psychology, there's a term called the good enough other or the good enough mother, because nobody's perfect and they frustrate us. And sometimes they don't come when we're wet fast enough, right? Or, something hurts or whatever. But then they comfort that. So we're not talking about a perfect other. What we're talking about is building a view of life that includes our picture of the other as not perfect, but good enough. Well, you can see where we're going with this. We know that by and large, people with happy marriages have the same conflicts as people with unhappy marriages. Now, what I mean by the content areas, finance, sex, parenting, having their needs met, etc. They fight about the same things. I mean, every relationship has conflict, but the successful ones, even though we're talking about money and getting frustrated, or kids are getting frustrated, or you didn't do this for me, or blah, 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 our picture of the other is stable enough that it includes they're good enough, they're not perfect, and I'm not perfect, and I'm going to make mistakes, which also allows me then to own my mistakes and not get narcissistically wounded if somebody criticizes me, because I go, oh, you're right. I got bad parts of me too, and I make mistakes. And what that builds is the equipment for stable relations. All right. So here's the problem. What if some of our most formative relationships, and I'm not just talking about in infancy, even though that's really important, or toddlerhood or childhood, but I'm also talking about even somebody can have their self and other picture wrecked by a horrible relationship with an invalidating gaslighter, for example. Because what somebody gaslights you, you go, well, that's not true. No, I didn't do that. Well, your pictures of the self and other go, no, wait a minute, who am I? I thought I felt that. No, I guess I didn't. I guess my feelings aren't valid. I should never have done that. And then you build these stable pictures of yourself, and then we operate life that way. So where does this go to, like in performance? One of my favorite studies of all time was done back in the 70s. They took 1,000 insurance salespeople, hired them out of two groups. One of the groups was brilliant, passed all the aptitude tests and everything, brilliant, but pessimistic. They saw the other and the world as negative in some way. They saw themselves as negative in some way. Well, I'm probably not very good at this. I don't know if I'll ever make a sale, blah, 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 blah. Then they took group two, and group two were not that smart. They flunked all the tests, but they had positive views of themselves and others. They sent them out into the field to sell insurance. The dummies who had positive outlooks on themselves and the world outsold the smart group by 53%. Just because they had stable, positive pictures of who they were and who the other was. Now, this gets into a lot of different issues. What if you want to set a boundary? What if you want to say no? Well, if your picture of yourself is my no is not valid, I'm selfish when I say no, I'm unloving, I'm not being a good Christian or whatever, if that's your picture of you and you don't deserve whatever your opinion is, and your picture of the other is, well, they're going to get mad, and they're going to reject me, and they're going to leave me if I have boundaries. You can see where that goes. Number one, you're probably going to be drawn to, and it feels familiar, and you're sometimes attracted to out of patterns, others that pretty much fit that picture. And somebody comes along that doesn't fit that picture, it's like boom, the pulse doesn't, start beating, and you don't get excited, and you don't feel that whatever. And so this stuff is huge. So that's one example, setting a boundary. Oh, what if you're sad? Well, they don't want to hear about me. Nobody else. And we get calls all the time. Well, there's no good ones out there. And it's like the old story. Guy moves into a new town, pulls in a gas station, asks the guy, so what do the people like around here? He says, well, what were they like in the last town you lived in? He said, oh, they were pretty good. He said, well, I suspect that's how you're going to find them here. He understood object relations, that we tend to have these outlooks. So, big deal. Where do we go with this? Lots of places. If you're in sales, for example, if your picture of the world, everybody's going to say no, well, you know what the successful salespeople think? Good enough. A lot of them are going to say no. And when that happens, it doesn't change their picture of themselves. But not all of them are going to say no. Some of them are going to be good. And I'm going to keep calling until I find that one. Take that to dating. All over the map. So here's what I want you to have. I want you to have a self-image that has a number of components to it. Your needs are good. Your feelings are valid. You have abilities and strengths. I mean, what if you were always told you're an idiot? Well, your picture of yourself is I have no skills or abilities and I'm going to fail. Your needs are good. Your talents are good. Your sexual feelings are a good part of you. They're not something to feel ashamed about. That you can try and make a mistake and fail. Oh, that was cool because I'm a learner. I can take from my mistakes and I can learn. If you were parented and responded to it a certain way. But what if you're criticized and beat up every time you make a mistake? So I want you to just sit down and write down, what are my views of myself in these areas? Okay. And I don't want them to all be positive. I mean, if I had all positive views of myself, I would fail at so many things because I would try to do stuff that I suck at. I need help in a bunch of areas, but I do have a picture of myself as, as long as I stay in my lane, I'm pretty good. I can do some stuff in this lane, but not in other lanes. And sometimes I blow it and sometimes I make mistakes. But if our picture of ourselves includes all that, then what's the big deal? We just learn from it because you learn you're a learner. But if our picture of the other is everybody's critical, that they invalidate me, there's no good ones out there, nobody will hire me, all bosses are like this, all, everything are like this, we're cooked, we're toast. So look at your views of yourself and others. Now, you may have some problems there, as we all do, because those views get tarnished in a lot of ways. But they are changeable. And what you've got to do is you've got to get into some good, if that's the case, some good healing relationships where you find yourself with a therapist or a group or a mentor or a friend who does treat your needs and feelings as valid and you do get responded to. And there's a cognitive process called assimilation and accommodation, where that's new data that we take in. Wait a minute, not everybody thinks I'm stupid. And then we accommodate that. It's like getting a new piece of furniture. When you bring it in the house, you got to accommodate, you got to make room for it in your head instead of negate it. I've got a friend, and every time you you a compliment, well, it really wasn't it, I just, or they'll say, yeah, but I didn't do this. There's an instant negation. Why would somebody do that? Because it doesn't fit their enduring picture of themselves. So stop doing that, assimilate it, take it in. Now let's flip it even further. What if your view of the world is you've never been disappointed enough or lied to? I had a friend in business one time who got really duped, and another friend said, well, his problem is he didn't grow up on the streets and he's never been lied to. Well, he has now. But see, over trusting people have a view of everybody as trustworthy. So your picture of others and the world has got to include the good and bad. Then you won't be disappointed. Or, how many times have I heard, I talk about faith to people and go, if you try to go, oh, I don't go to church. Well, why not? Well, I went once and, they were just a bunch of hypocrites and all they did was ask for money. Come on. Of course that happened. We live in an imperfect world. But I can guarantee you there are a lot of good ones out there where you can be healed and grown and helped and supported and cared for as well. So our picture of the world, I love this verse in the Bible where Paul says in Romans chapter 12, he says, have a sober estimation or picture or image or view or evaluation of yourself. Let's get it accurate. That's the word. And let's get our view of the world as accurate, meaning there are some really bad people out there who are going to hurt you and you should stay away from them as far as you can. It's boundaries with a capital B. There are some collateral damage hurtful people, not trying to hurt you, but they end up hurting you because their character problems are so significant. And then we need some boundaries with a little smaller B and sometimes a big one. And there's other people, the good ones, that are going to make mistakes that we just need our normal boundaries with. Hey, I love you, but you stepped on my toe. Oh, I'm sorry. I won't do that again. Normal. But our views of life have to have that.